Marcus Wellington adjusted his silk tie one final time before stepping out of his black Bentley. The mansion before him stood like a monument to success, its marble columns gleaming in the afternoon sun. At 45, Marcus had everything money could buy. His tech company had just been valued at $2 billion, making him one of the youngest billionaires in the country. Yet as he walked through the grand entrance of his Beverly Hills estate, something felt hollow inside his chest. "Good afternoon, Mr. Wellington," came a soft voice from the shadows of the foyer. Marcus barely glanced up from his phone as he acknowledged the greeting with a grunt. The voice belonged to Sarah, a middle-aged black woman who had been cleaning his house for the past 3 years. She was part of the invisible army of staff that kept his life running smoothly while he focused on building his empire. Sarah had learned to make herself small around Mr. Wellington. She knew he preferred his employees to be seen but not heard, efficient but not intrusive. She moved through the mansion like a ghost, dusting priceless artifacts and polishing marble floors that cost more than most people's homes. Her own home was a tiny apartment 20 miles away, where she lived with her teenage daughter Keisha. Marcus threw his briefcase onto the Italian leather sofa and loosened his tie. Another successful day of meetings, another few million added to his net worth. He had just closed a deal that would revolutionize artificial intelligence, but the victory felt strangely empty. His phone buzzed constantly with congratulatory messages from business partners, but none from friends or family. Marcus had burned those bridges long ago in his relentless pursuit of success. "Will you be dining at home tonight, sir?" Sarah's voice was respectful but distant. She stood in the doorway of the living room, her cleaning supplies neatly organized in a caddy beside her. "No," Marcus replied without looking up from his phone. "I have a dinner meeting with investors." It was a lie. He had no plans except to work until midnight in his home office, the same routine that had consumed his life for years. As Sarah turned to leave, something caught Marcus's eye. A glint of silver around her wrist made him pause mid-scroll through his emails. For reasons he couldn't explain, he found himself staring at the simple bracelet she wore. It was nothing fancy, just a thin chain with a small heart-shaped charm, but something about it made his stomach clench with an emotion he hadn't felt in decades. "Where did you get that bracelet?" The words tumbled out of his mouth before he could stop them. His voice sounded strange, almost desperate. Sarah looked down at her wrist, surprised by the question. "This old thing?" "I've had it for years, sir. It's not valuable or anything." She seemed nervous, as if she might be in trouble for wearing jewelry while working. Marcus stood up slowly, his legs feeling unsteady. Can I see it?" The request was so unusual that Sarah hesitated for a moment before extending her arm. As Marcus moved closer, his hands began to tremble. The bracelet was exactly as he remembered it, down to the tiny scratch on the heart charm where it had caught on a fence 27 years ago. The room began to spin around Marcus as memories crashed over him like a tsunami. He was 18 again, standing in the parking lot of Jefferson Community College with tears in his eyes. The girl he loved was walking away from him, this very bracelet glinting on her wrist as she wiped her own tears. He had been so angry, so proud, so stupid. "Marcus, we can't keep doing this," she had said that day. "Your family will never accept me, and you're too scared to stand up to them. I can't wait forever for you to choose." He had watched her go, convinced that his pride and his family's approval were worth more than love. Within a year, he had transferred to an elite university, started his first company, and buried himself in work. He never tried to find her, never apologized, never explained that walking away from her was the biggest mistake of his life. "Sir? Are you all right?" Sarah's concerned voice broke through his memories. Marcus realized he was gripping the back of a chair so hard his knuckles had turned white. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the air conditioning. "What's your last name?" he whispered, afraid of the answer. "Johnson, sir. Sarah Johnson." She looked worried now, as if she might need to call for medical help. Marcus felt the world tilt on its axis. Sarah Johnson. His Sarah had become Sarah Johnson. She had married someone else, built a life without him, while he had spent decades accumulating wealth and power that meant nothing without someone to share it with. You don't remember me, do you? He asked, his voice barely audible. The question hung in the air between them like a bridge waiting to be crossed or burned. Sarah stared at him intently for the first time since she had started working in his house. She studied his face, looking past the expensive haircut and designer clothes to the boy she had once known. Her eyes widened with shock and recognition. Marcus, she breathed. Marcus Thompson? He had changed his last name when he started his first company, wanting to distance himself from his family's middle-class reputation. But she remembered the scared boy who had been too weak to fight for their love. The recognition hit them both like a physical blow. 27 years of separation, success, and heartbreak collapsed into a single moment of devastating clarity. Marcus had spent nearly 3 decades building an empire while the woman he had never stopped loving cleaned his floors and he never even knew. I looked for you, Sarah said quietly, her own eyes filling with tears. After college, I tried to find you. But you had disappeared. Changed your name, moved across the country. I thought you hated me for walking away. Marcus couldn't speak. His throat felt like it was closing as he realized the magnitude of what he had lost. Not just Sarah, but all the years they could have had together. The family they might have built, the memories they should have shared. Instead, she had been invisible to him for 3 years, just another employee whose name he barely knew. I never stopped loving you, he finally managed to say. The words came out broken and raw. Not for a single day in 27 years. I was just too proud and too scared to admit it. Sarah's hand flew to her mouth as she began to cry. The bracelet caught the light again, and Marcus remembered giving it to her for her 19th birthday. He had saved for months from his part-time job to buy it, wanting to give her something that would show how much she meant to him. She had worn it every day until the morning she walked away from him. Why didn't you fight for me? She whispered through her tears. I waited so long for you to call, to come after me, to prove that I was worth more to you than your family's approval. But you never did. The accusation hit Marcus like a knife to the chest because it was absolutely true. He had been a coward, choosing the easy path of family acceptance over the hard work of building a love that could overcome prejudice and social expectations. His parents had made it clear that Sarah wasn't good enough for their ambitious son, and he had been too weak to tell them they were wrong. I was 18 and stupid, Marcus said, his voice breaking. I thought I had all the time in the world to figure things out. I thought you would wait forever. When you left, I convinced myself that you didn't really love me, that it was better this way. But I never believed it. Not really. Sarah wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, the bracelet sliding down her wrist. I did wait, Marcus. I waited for 2 years. I turned down dates, I transferred schools hoping you might come back, I kept this bracelet on every single day thinking it might bring you back to me. But you never came. The pain in her voice was unbearable. Marcus realized that while he had been building his fortune and telling himself he was better off alone, Sarah had been grieving their lost love just as deeply. The difference was that she had eventually found the strength to move on, to build a life and a family, while he had remained emotionally frozen at 18 years old. You got married, he said, noticing the thin gold band on her finger alongside the silver bracelet. The wedding ring was simple and worn, the kind that spoke of a long marriage built on love rather than luxury. I did, Sarah confirmed, her voice growing stronger. James is a good man. He knew about you, about us, and he never asked me to take off this bracelet. He understood that first love never really leaves you, even when it has to end. Marcus felt a stab of jealousy so sharp it took his breath away. Another man had seen what he had been too blind to appreciate. James had understood that Sarah's capacity to love deeply was a gift, not a burden. He had been secure enough to let her keep a piece of her past while building a future together. Do you have children? Marcus asked, though he dreaded the answer. The thought of Sarah's children, the family that should have been his, was almost too painful to bear. One daughter, Sarah said, her face lighting up despite her tears. Keisha. She's 17, about to graduate high school. She's smart, Marcus. Smarter than both of us. She wants to study computer science, just like you did. The irony was devastating. Sarah's daughter wanted to follow the same path that had led Marcus to his billions, while he sat alone in his mansion every night wondering what his life might have been like if he had chosen love over ambition. He could have been Keisha's father, could have watched her grow up, could have shared Sarah's pride in their brilliant daughter. "Where is James now?" Marcus asked, needing to know the full extent of what he had lost. Sarah's face crumpled with fresh grief. "He died last year. Cancer. He fought so hard, but..." She couldn't finish the sentence. The loss was still too raw, too present. Marcus felt the ground shift beneath him again. Sarah was alone, had been alone for a year while he lived in ignorant luxury just floors above where she worked. She had been grieving her husband's death while scrubbing his toilets and dusting his shelves, and he had never even noticed her pain. "Why didn't you tell me who you were when you started working here?" he asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "What would have been the point?" Sarah replied with a sad smile. "You were Marcus Wellington, billionaire tech mogul. I was just Sarah Johnson, a widow who needed a job to pay for her daughter's college applications. I figured you had forgotten all about the poor girl from community college who wasn't good enough for your family." The truth of her words cut through Marcus like broken glass. He had become exactly what his family had wanted him to be: successful, wealthy, and completely isolated from anything that might remind him of his humble beginnings. He had built walls so high around his heart that he couldn't see the woman he loved even when she was standing right in front of him. "I never forgot you," he said desperately. "I tried to forget, but I couldn't. Every woman I dated, I compared to you. Every success felt hollow because you weren't there to share it. I'd been living half a life for 27 years, Sarah. Half a life because the other half belonged to you." Sarah looked at him with an expression that mixed pity with lingering love. "But you did forget me, Marcus. Maybe not in your heart, but in every way that mattered. You forgot that love is supposed to make you brave, not scared. You forgot that some things are worth fighting for, even when the fight is hard." Her words hit him like a physical blow because they were absolutely true. He had spent decades telling himself he was a fighter, a competitor who never backed down from a challenge. But when it came to the only battle that really mattered, the fight for love, he had surrendered before he even began. The mansion suddenly felt like a mausoleum, beautiful and cold and empty. All of his possessions, all of his achievements, all of his wealth meant nothing compared to the simple silver bracelet on Sarah's wrist. That bracelet represented everything he had thrown away: love, loyalty, the courage to fight for what mattered most. As they stood there looking at each other across 27 years of regret and missed opportunities, Marcus realized that seeing Sarah again was both the best and worst thing that had ever happened to him. Best because she was alive, she was here, she was real. Worst because he finally understood the true cost of his choices, and it was a price too devastating to bear. The afternoon sun slanted through the mansion's tall windows, casting long shadows across the marble floors. In those shadows, Marcus could see the ghost of the boy he used to be, the one who had loved Sarah Johnson with all his heart but hadn't been brave enough to fight for her. That boy had died the day she walked away, replaced by a man who confused success with happiness and wealth with worth. Now, standing in his empty palace, Marcus Wellington began to understand that he hadn't built an empire at all. He had built a prison, and he was the only prisoner inside. The silence stretched between them like a chasm filled with 27 years of unspoken words. Marcus's hands shook as he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone, but not to make a call or send a text. Instead, he scrolled through his photos until he found what he was looking for. With trembling fingers, he turned the screen toward Sarah. "I kept this," he whispered. The photo was old, taken with a disposable camera and later digitized. It showed Sarah at 19, laughing at something he had said while they sat by the lake near their college. She was wearing the same bracelet that now caught the light on her wrist. Marcus had carried this photo with him through every phone upgrade, every new device, every technological advancement of the past 3 decades. Sarah's breath caught as she recognized the image. "You kept a picture of me all these years?" "I kept everything," Marcus admitted, his voice barely audible. "Every letter you wrote me, every ticket stub from movies we saw together, every napkin where you doodled our names. I have a safe in my office upstairs filled with memories of us. Sometimes, late at night, I would take everything out and spread it on my desk like some pathetic shrine to what I threw away. The revelation hit Sarah like a physical force. While she had moved on, married, raised a daughter, and built a life, Marcus had been trapped in amber, preserved in the moment she walked away from him. The successful billionaire facade cracked completely, revealing the broken boy underneath. "Why didn't you come after me?" Sarah asked again, but this time her voice was gentler, filled with curiosity rather than accusation. "If you loved me that much, if you kept all those things, why did you let me go?" Marcus closed his eyes, and suddenly, he was 18 again, standing in his parents' living room while his father paced back and forth like a caged animal. "She's not one of us, Marcus," his father had said, his voice cold and final. "This little infatuation will ruin everything we've worked for. You have a future, boy. Don't throw it away for some girl who will only hold you back." His mother had been worse, her racism disguised as concern. "People will talk, Marcus. Your business connections, your social standing, everything will be damaged. Is she really worth destroying your entire future?" They had worn him down with their relentless pressure, their threats to cut off his college funding, their warnings about the harsh realities of an interracial relationship in 1997. At 18, he had believed them. He had been convinced that loving Sarah was a luxury he couldn't afford if he wanted to succeed. "They made me believe that loving you was selfish," Marcus said, opening his eyes to meet Sarah's gaze. "My parents convinced me that I would be ruining your life as much as mine. They said you deserved someone who could love you without complications, without having to fight the world just to be together." Sarah's expression softened with understanding. She had known his parents, had seen the way they looked at her during the few uncomfortable family dinners she had attended. She had felt their disapproval like ice in her veins, but she had hoped that Marcus's love for her would be stronger than their prejudice. "So you decided to save me from a life of loving you," she said with bitter irony. "How noble of you to make that choice for me." The sarcasm in her voice cut deep because Marcus could hear the pain underneath it. He had told himself for years that walking away had been an act of love, that he was protecting Sarah from a difficult life. But the truth was simpler and more selfish. He had been protecting himself from the hard work of fighting for their relationship. "I was a coward," he said simply. "I told myself I was being noble, but I was just too scared to choose you over their approval. I thought I could have both eventually, that I could make my fortune first and, then, come back for you when I was successful enough to prove them wrong. But you never came back," Sarah pointed out, and there was a lifetime of hurt in those 5 words. "By the time I was successful enough to tell my parents to go to hell, it was too late," Marcus explained, his voice breaking. "I hired investigators to find you when I made my first million. That was 8 years after college. You were already married to James, already had Keisha. You looked so happy in the photos they brought me. I realized I had no right to disrupt the life you had built." Sarah stared at him in shock. "You had investigators watching me?" "Just once," Marcus said quickly. "I needed to know that you were okay, that you were happy. When I saw that you were, I told myself to leave you alone. I thought I was doing the right thing by staying away." The complexity of his emotions was overwhelming. Relief that she had found happiness, devastation that it was with someone else, guilt that his cowardice had forced her to build a life without him. Marcus had convinced himself that his sacrifice was noble, but now he could see it for what it truly was, the final act of selfishness from a man who had spent his life taking the easy way out. Sarah walked to the window and stared out at the perfectly manicured gardens that surrounded the mansion. "James knew about you," she said quietly. "I told him everything on our second date. About the boy I loved who was too scared to love me back. He said he understood, that everyone has a first love they never quite get over." Marcus felt another stab of jealousy, followed immediately by profound respect for the man who had loved Sarah enough to accept her completely, past and all. "He sounds like he was a good man." "The best," Sarah confirmed, her voice thick with emotion. "He loved Keisha like she was his own daughter. He worked 2 jobs to pay for her piano lessons and tutoring. He never missed a school play or a soccer game, even when the cancer made him weak.
He was everything a husband and father should be. The implicit comparison hung in the air between them. James had been present, devoted, selfless. Marcus had been absent, focused on building wealth instead of relationships, too self-absorbed to even recognize the woman he claimed to love when she stood in his own house.
"Does Keisha know about me?"
Marcus asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer.
"She knows I had a boyfriend in college who broke my heart," Sarah said carefully.
"She doesn't know your name or who you became."
I never wanted her to grow up thinking her mother pined for some fantasy of what might have been. But Marcus could hear what Sarah wasn't saying. Keisha didn't know about him because there had been nothing worth knowing. He had been just a painful memory, a cautionary tale about young love and poor choices.
He hadn't earned the right to be part of Sarah's family narrative.
"What is she like?" Marcus asked, desperate to know something about the daughter who might have been his in another life.
Sarah's face transformed when she talked about Keisha.
The pain and complicated emotions gave way to pure maternal love and pride.
"She's brilliant, Marcus. She taught herself to code when she was 12.
She's already been accepted to MIT, Berkeley, and Stanford for computer science. She wants to work in artificial intelligence, to create technology that can help people."
The irony was crushing.
Marcus had built his fortune in technology, had become one of the leading experts in artificial intelligence, and Sarah's daughter was following the same path. In another timeline, he might have been the one teaching Keisha to code, sharing his passion for innovation with his own child. "She sounds incredible," Marcus said, his voice hollow with loss.
"She is," Sarah agreed. "But she's also angry.
The cancer treatments bankrupted us, even with insurance.
James died owing hundreds of thousands in medical bills. Keisha had to watch her stepfather waste away while I worked 3 jobs to try to keep up with the costs.
She's brilliant enough to change the world, but she might not get the chance because we can't afford to send her to college." The revelation hit Marcus like a punch to the stomach. While he lived in luxury beyond imagination, the woman he loved and her daughter were struggling with crushing debt. Sarah had been working as his maid not because she enjoyed cleaning houses, but because she was desperate to pay off her dead husband's medical bills and somehow find a way to send her daughter to college.
"How much do you owe?" Marcus asked, his mind already calculating. "It doesn't matter," Sarah said quickly, recognizing the direction of his thoughts. "I'm not telling you this so you'll feel sorry for us. We'll figure it out.
Keisha can take out student loans, work part-time, apply for more scholarships.
We don't need your charity."
But Marcus was already pulling out his phone, fingers flying across the screen as he accessed his banking apps.
"The total amount, Sarah. How much for the medical bills and Keisha's college?"
"Marcus, no," Sarah said firmly, but he could see the desperation in her eyes. She was proud, but she was also a mother who would do anything to give her daughter the opportunities she deserved. 400,000, she whispered finally. "Maybe 500 with all the interest and penalties. But you can't just write a check to fix my problems."
"That's not how this works."
Marcus laughed, but there was no humor in the sound.
$500,000?
"Sarah, I spend more than that on wine in a year. I have art in this house worth millions that I've never even looked at. $500,000 is nothing to me, but it's everything to you and Keisha."
The vast inequality between their circumstances was stark and horrible.
Marcus could solve all of Sarah's financial problems with what amounted to pocket change for him, but doing so would only highlight the absurd injustice of how their lives had diverged.
"I won't take your money," Sarah said stubbornly. "I won't let you buy your way out of 27 years of abandonment with a charitable donation."
Her words stung because they were true. Marcus was trying to fix with money what could only be healed with time and trust and genuine change. But he couldn't just sit there knowing that the woman he loved and her brilliant daughter were drowning in debt while he had more money than he could spend in 10 lifetimes.
"Then, let me hire Keisha," Marcus said desperately. "My company has the best internship program in the industry.
She could work for us this summer, earn money for college and gain experience. It wouldn't be charity, she would earn every penny." Sarah looked at him with suspicion and hope in equal measure.
You don't even know her.
You can't hire someone just because she's my daughter. I hire based on talent, Marcus said, which was true. If she's as brilliant as you say, if she's already been accepted to the top computer science programs in the country, then she's exactly the kind of person my company needs. Send me her resume, her transcripts, examples of her coding projects. If she's qualified, I'll give her a chance.
If she's not, I won't. For the first time since their reunion began, Sarah looked at him with something other than pain or disappointment.
She looked at him with the faintest glimmer of hope, and it was more precious to Marcus than all the money in his bank accounts.
She won't want your help if she knows who you are to me, Sarah warned.
Then, don't tell her, Marcus said simply. Let her apply on her own merits. Let her earn the position. If she's as proud as her mother, she wouldn't want it any other way.
Sarah was quiet for a long moment, considering the offer.
Marcus could see her internal struggle, her pride warred with her love for her daughter, her suspicion of his motives battled with her desperate need to give Keisha every possible opportunity. What do you want in return? She asked finally, because she had learned that nothing in life was free. Nothing, Marcus said, and he meant it. I don't want to buy forgiveness or absolution.
I don't want to force my way back into your life. I just want to do one thing right after 27 years of doing everything wrong.
The sincerity in his voice was unmistakable, but Sarah had been hurt too deeply to trust easily.
And if Keisha gets the internship? What then? Do you plan to tell her who you are? Do you want to play father to a girl who already lost the only dad she ever knew?
Marcus felt the weight of her questions like stones in his chest.
What did he want? To be part of Sarah's family? To reclaim the life he had thrown away? To somehow make up for 3 decades of absence with money and influence?
I don't know, he admitted. I don't know what I want beyond making sure that Keisha gets the chances she deserves.
Maybe that's enough. Maybe that's all I have the right to ask for.
Sarah studied his face, looking for signs of the manipulative businessman or the selfish boy who had broken her heart. What she saw instead was a man genuinely grappling with the magnitude of his failures and trying to find some way to atone for them. I'll think about it, she said finally. But, Marcus, if you hurt her, if you disappoint her the way you disappointed me, I will make sure you regret it for the rest of your life.
Keisha has been through enough.
She doesn't need another father figure who runs away when things get complicated. The threat was delivered quietly, but Marcus heard the steel underneath Sarah's words.
She was no longer the 19-year-old girl who had loved him desperately.
She was a mother who had watched her husband die, who had fought to keep her family afloat, who had learned to be fierce in protecting the people she loved.
I understand, Marcus said. And, Sarah? Whatever happens with Keisha, whatever you decide about the job or anything else, I want you to know something. Walking away from you was the biggest mistake of my life. Not just because of what I lost, but because of what you had to face alone. James's illness, the medical bills, raising Keisha, dealing with grief and debt and uncertainty.
You should never have had to carry all of that by yourself. Sarah's eyes filled with tears again, but she blinked them back.
I wasn't alone, Marcus.
I had James, and I had Keisha, and I had friends and neighbors who cared about us. I built a life full of love, even if it wasn't the life I planned when I was 19. Her words were like a dagger to his heart because they highlighted the fundamental difference between them. Sarah had learned to love again, to build community, to find joy and meaning even in struggle. Marcus had retreated into isolation, surrounding himself with wealth and achievements that meant nothing without people to share them with. I'm glad you weren't alone, he said, and he meant it even though the knowledge hurt. You deserved to be loved completely. I just wish I had been brave enough to be the one doing the loving. The late afternoon sun was starting to fade, casting longer shadows through the mansion's windows. Soon, Sarah would finish her cleaning and drive back to her small apartment, back to her real life with her daughter and her bills and her genuine connections. Marcus would remain in his palace, surrounded by luxury and emptiness, counting money that could never buy back the only thing he had ever truly wanted. But something had changed between them in the past hour. The recognition, the honesty, the shared acknowledgement of loss and regret had cracked open a door that had been sealed for 27 years. Neither of them knew what might come through that door, but, for the first time since 1997, they both felt something other than despair when they thought about their shared past. 3 weeks later, Marcus sat in his corner office on the 40th floor of Wellington Technologies, staring at a resume that made his heart race.
Keisha Johnson's application was everything Sarah had promised and more.
Perfect grades, multiple programming languages mastered, innovative projects that showed real creativity and problem-solving skills. At 17, she had already designed a mobile app to help elderly patients remember their medications, and created an AI chatbot for her school's mental health support program. But it wasn't just her technical skills that impressed Marcus. Her essay about why she wanted to study artificial intelligence was passionate and thoughtful. She wrote about wanting to use technology to solve real-world problems, to make life better for people who struggled like her family had struggled. She wrote about her stepfather's illness and how inadequate medical technology had made his final months more difficult than they needed to be. Marcus had read the essay 12 times, each reading making him more proud of a girl he had never met and more ashamed of his own absence from her life. This brilliant, compassionate young woman was everything he would have wanted in a daughter, and she existed completely independent of him.
"Sir?"
His assistant's voice came through the intercom.
"Keisha Johnson is here for her interview." Marcus's hands trembled as he straightened his tie.
He had been preparing for this moment since Sarah had reluctantly agreed to let Keisha apply. The girl didn't know who Marcus was, only that she had been selected for an interview with Wellington Technologies' CEO personally, an honor usually reserved for graduate students from top universities. "Send her in," Marcus said, his voice steadier than he felt. The door opened, and Marcus saw Sarah in every line of Keisha's face. She had her mother's warm brown eyes and determined chin, but there was something else there too, a fierce intelligence that reminded Marcus of himself at that age. She was tall and confident, wearing a simple black suit that was clearly her best outfit, with her hair pulled back in a professional bun. "Mr. Wellington," Keisha said, stepping forward with a firm handshake.
"Thank you for this opportunity. I know you must be busy."
Marcus was struck speechless for a moment. This poised young woman was nothing like the teenager he had expected. She carried herself with the confidence of someone who had faced real hardship and emerged stronger, someone who had learned early that she would need to fight for everything she wanted in life. "Please, sit down," Marcus managed, gesturing to the chair across from his desk.
"I've been looking forward to meeting you. Your application is quite impressive."
Keisha sat with perfect posture, her hands folded in her lap.
"I appreciate you saying that, sir. I know there must be hundreds of applicants for your internship program.
I'm curious why you chose to interview me personally instead of having your HR department handle it." The directness of her question caught Marcus off guard. Most people were intimidated by his wealth and status, but Keisha seemed genuinely curious rather than nervous. She had her mother's ability to cut through social pretense and get to the heart of things. "Because your projects show exactly the kind of thinking we need," Marcus said, which was true even if it wasn't the whole truth. "Tell me about the medication reminder app you created for senior citizens."
Keisha's face lit up with enthusiasm. "That project started because of my stepfather.
During his cancer treatment, he had so many different medications with different schedules, and some of the side effects made him confused about what he had already taken.
The existing apps were too complicated for someone dealing with chemo brain."
She pulled out her phone and showed Marcus the simple, intuitive interface she had designed. "I focused on large, clear buttons and voice reminders. The app also sends alerts to family members if medications are missed, and it can track side effects to share with doctors. I tested it with 12 volunteers from the cancer support group my stepfather attended." Marcus listened, fascinated not just by her technical skill but by her compassion. At 17, while most teenagers were worried about social media and dating, Keisha had been creating technology to help people like her dying stepfather. The app was sophisticated but user-friendly, showing both advanced programming ability and deep emotional intelligence.
"What made you interested in artificial intelligence specifically?" Marcus asked.
I want to create technology that can think alongside humans, not replace them, Keisha said with passion.
AI should make us more compassionate, more capable of solving complex problems.
I've seen how the right technology can literally save lives, and how the wrong technology can make people feel more isolated and helpless.
Her words hit Marcus like a revelation.
This was what he had lost sight of in his pursuit of profit and market dominance.
He had created AI systems that made him billions, but he couldn't remember the last time he had asked whether his innovations actually made the world better.
Keisha, at 17, understood something about the purpose of technology that he had forgotten somewhere along his climb to the top.
Your grades are perfect, your projects are innovative, your thinking is sophisticated, Marcus said. But, I have to ask, why do you want this internship? You could probably get offers from any tech company in Silicon Valley.
Keisha hesitated for a moment, and, for the first time, she looked like the teenager she actually was.
Honestly, Mr. Wellington, my family needs the money.
My mom has been working 3 jobs since my dad died, trying to pay off his medical bills and save for my college. I know internships usually don't pay much, but every little bit helps.
The honesty in her answer made Marcus's chest tighten with emotion. Here was this brilliant girl, capable,